Salam world, I'm a shorter than average girl from down under and we're finally getting into it. Well, kind of. This isn't another clickbaity kind of video. We will be doing some analysis, but there's been a change in plans. For the past week and a half, I've been working on the first of the 3 analyses videos, the one about free will and predestination, but when editing it, I wasn't very happy with the results. First of all, the video is around 3 hours long.
Ain't nobody got time for that!
And even still, I didn't feel like I got everything that I wanted to say across. I think the issue is the normal format of my videos. This intro, background, recap, analysis, and review structure, which I've used for all my other analyses videos, just won't work for Arcane. Because it's not one story, but many, which are intertwined, interweave, and lead to major changes in one another. Each character goes on a journey worth its own analysis. And given that this channel is about picking up inspirational character arcs, identifying the key motives and moments, then understanding their implications on a universal level and how we can use these lessons and skills for ourselves, it would honestly be outside the channel's motives and ethos to render a complex show like Arcane into 3 dull, multi-hour long videos. I would be disappointed in myself if I did that. Now, I'm not throwing away 10 days worth of work. I'm revamping it. We will be getting those 3 holistic videos about the show at the end, but before that, we're going to be analyzing the major stories of the show and their takeaways. I feel like understanding those will add to the complexity of the 3 topics we want to dive into holistically at the end. However, identifying the major stories is not an easy feat, but the show is clearly structured in a way where some characters get more attention than others. Whether it's because they get more screen time, flashbacks, or entire plots that are viewed from their lens, or plots that show us that everyone is focused on this individual. As an audience, we can't help but think that they are the main characters in this particular moment. It's a genius move because it highlights this natural human psychology of seeing ourselves as the main character of our own story. We get put into the minds of all these characters, understanding their views and their main character energy, only to be pulled out and noticing that they are only part of the whole story. One cog to make or break the whole show, which is insane writing, and also why a show like Arcane is a landmine for someone like me. To make the discussions more structured from henceforth, we need to introduce the use of parallels in Arcane. Duality in all its forms are used throughout the show. It's used to contrast different decisions or environments, to complement or complete characters and plots, or to build parallels between different locations or generations to highlight the cyclical nature of life. And this makes the show both more complex and straightforward, because we humans find it easier to understand things when we are comparing them to one another. And comparisons are used to the max, to the extent that every episode in season 1 is paralleled in season 2. Crazy! So let's start with episode 1. Here, we're introduced to a particular location. In season 1, it's Zorn, and in season 2, Piltover. This is where the problem is going to start, and we see the consequences of whatever that problem ends up being. Episode 2 focuses on showing us the other side.
Every action sparks a reaction.
Not to mention, we are introduced to the power that's going to be the major influence throughout the show. In season 1, that was Hex Tech, as well as Shimmer. In season 2, the Anomaly. And finally, we end the episode with a contrast of life and death. The characters of Vi and Victor are in the center of this, where Vi gets put into a situation where we lose hope and it seems dire, and Victor is always in a position where he is saving someone, giving us some hope at the end of the tunnel. Episode 3 is where we see the power at its full swing, whether it be Shimmer and Hextech in Season 1 or the Anomaly in Season 2. We see how it affects both sides, both locations. The things that eventuate due to the introduction of the power lead to a shift in social order, in the distribution of power, whether it be for the betterment of society or detriment. At the same time, we see a breakdown in family, particularly for Vi, where she loses everything at the end of both episodes. Episode 4 is a time skip. We see the consequences of this new social order as well as the introduction of power in the universe at play. At the same time, this episode emphasizes Jinx's evolution. Episode 5 I would call the love episode in both seasons. So of course it's going to start off with reintroducing post-time skip Vi. Vi is used as the one bringing family back together. It's also the episode where we see Mal kindling relationships. And of course, we can't talk about episode 5 without talking about Jace and him having to make the hard decisions. Episode 5 also highlights his advancement in Hextech technology. Episode 6 is Victor's episode. It's the episode where we're introduced to his motives, his intentions, and the changes in how he's acting. Many of our characters in episode 6 need to make hard decisions, picking between two different loves. Episode 6 blurs the lines between right and wrong and makes us realize how destructive love could possibly be. End of both episode 6, we see Vi reuniting with someone that she loves. But unfortunately, the universe always has it out for Vi, and episode 6 ends poorly in both situations, particularly for my girly Jinx. Episode 7, an episode which is dedicated to the boy savior. In this episode, we get to see our boy savior's mentality, him reuniting with someone that he dearly loves and confronts the major obstacle and love in his life. In contrast, episode 7 also highlights the dilemma that Jace is going through, having to pick between right or wrong, between Mel and Victor. And then everything goes so wrong in episode 8. A episode which starts off by providing context about Mel, something that's necessary because a big part of both episode 8 is Mel's interactions with her mother. Again, highlighting the negative side of doing something blindly just for love. And this is also something we see Vi and Jace fall into, particularly when they choose violence. Other elements of episode 8 is Episode 9 is the messy conclusion. In both episodes, Jace makes a plan to try and re-establish peace or save everybody from some inevitable doom. But at the end, it's the arbiters of free will, as we'll talk about in our free will and predestination video. They're the ones that need to make the choice at the end. For our favorite girl, that was picking between Powder or Jinx. For Victor, picking between perfection or pursuit. In both situations, someone that really cares about them or loves them is trying to convince them about one thing or the other. In the end of both episodes, we lose someone really dear to us. A father figure. Now, season 1 is used predominantly to build the duality between Topside and the Undercity. We see this through the architecture of the locations. One location builds up, the other builds down. One features refined and classical arts, while the other party funk and graffiti. One brings nature to the concrete jungle, while the other builds a concrete jungle around nature. Then there are the contrasts in ideology.
I'm sorry, Grayson, but I can't offer up my own people.
valuing the collective and sticking by one another's side, whilst
You've just made yourself everyone's common enemy, Jace.
where personal interests triumph over what is best for all. And that can be seen by the two sides of the ruling bodies, our two oligarchs, one masquerading as a democracy while the other plainly acting as a mafia. Topical much? But aside from that, the characters are also used to represent the differences between the two sides. Their personal values, level and type of intelligence, innocence, and naivety are used to build an idea of what it feels like to have lived on the two sides. There are three types of character parallels that I wish to highlight: comparisons, contrasts, and inheritance. And personally, I think that there are 6 titular characters in the show that all ideas are explored through, with at least another 10 characters used to elevate the plot and discussion about these 6. So let's start off with them. Our 2 love triangles. And when I say love triangles, I don't mean the classical romantic triangle, but it's a triangle that holds a deeper level of purpose and codependence, particularly for the center member of the 2 triangles. There are 2 major things distinguishing our trios. The first is location and the second is age. Our older Pilty trio are Jace, Mel, and Victor, whilst our younger Undercity trio are Vi, Jinx, and Kate. And you're probably thinking, Victor's a Zornite and Kate's a certified Pilty, which is true and intentional, because they are the arbiters of open-mindedness and understanding in Season 1, turned closed-minded chaos bringers in Season 2. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Both trios have characters of the same archetypes. The center of these 2 triangles are the lovers, Jace and Vi, characters who feel like they're being cornered to pick a side rather than having the other 2 characters equally in their life, because they feel like they can't satisfy them both. Their entire goal is to give those they care about an equal chance at life. They're grateful for a particular event which occurred to them in their childhood and gave them the chance to prosper and flourish. And so they feel this duty to give back. Those feelings are especially exasperated for the people they love. This feeling of indebtedness, which stems from both gratitude and later on guilt, leads them to make illogical and super cringy decisions. And so they will be mostly featured in the love and relationships analysis. On the other hand, you have the independent mad geniuses, Victor and Jinx. Both characters were handed a short stick at the beginning of their life, which influences their rebellious personalities. Their need to prove themselves, to feel worthwhile, leads to others recognizing their intellectual potential and having it used for purposes outside their own set goals and desires. Now, the interesting thing is Victor and Jinx have different goals in life, but they end up fulfilling each other's purpose. Victor yearns to leave a legacy or a mark on the world, particularly when it comes to assisting those in the Undercity, but he finds that his life is cut short and his memory erased, whilst Jinx wants to be free of the way that people view her and able to express herself and be loved for it, only to accept the way that she's been viewed and molding herself to that vision to make a positive impact. At the end, Victor finds someone who loves him for who he is, giving him the drive to unmold the mask of perfection and die peacefully with the one and only person who really ever knew him. On the other hand, Jinx becomes the symbol of resistance, uniting Zorn and leaving a large mark on the pages of Piltover's history. And that is why Victor and Jinx will be the anchors for our free will versus predestination discussion. And the final members of our trios are the oligarchs, Kate and Mel, both born into high-standing families with the pressure of maintaining the family name and status, but their own ideas of bringing order and justice differs from that of the family's matriarch. And so they find themselves feeling the need to do more and go beyond to prove that their ideas have better results. But later, an event which is out of both of their control leads them to confront these differences and ultimately pushing them into new roles of maintaining order, which could be seen as them becoming more in touch with their inheritance. We'll be talking about these two characters predominantly in our heroes and villains analysis, because those with most power are most likely to be universally labeled. Now, there are two disclaimers that I want to make about these parallel trios. The first is those who are familiar with psychoanalysis. I'm not saying that these characters have the same Jungian archetype. I would argue that Jace and Vi, Kate and Mel would share the same orientation as their counterpart, but that's definitely not the case for Jinx or Victor. Now, I'm no psychologist, but if I had to give these characters a Jungian archetype, I'd say that Jace is more like an everyman, whereas Vi is a lover. Mel is a creator, whereas Kate would be more of a caregiver. Jinx wants to be an explorer, but ends up being an outlaw, whereas Victor wants to be a magician, but ends up being a sage. Again, I'm no psychologist, and I know that there are a lot of psychologists who have analyzed these characters, and I'm sure would do a much better job at psychoanalyzing them. The second thing is, just because these 6 characters are parallels of each other, it doesn't mean that everything about them is comparable. There are major differences between them that actually highlight how, surprise, surprise, free will and predestination leads to completely different outcomes for our characters. As I stated before, each of these 6 characters also have a parallel from the previous generation, reflecting this generational cycle.
One that started long before Vanda and me, and that will continue long after the two of you.
And the correlation of one generation's action on the next. Jinx is a reflection of Silco, Vi of Vander, Jace of Heimdigger, and Victor of Singed. As for our rich besties, it's their mummies dearest. Outside the triangle, there are another 2 kind of generational relationships worth mentioning. Jinx and Isha, and Echo and Benzo. Now, Echo is a special character on the show. He's the anomaly that breaks all the rules that the makers have made for themselves. Literally the cause of the beginning and the end of the show. Without Echo, there is no Arcane, even though he is a sideline character. If we wanted to tie Echo down to these rules of parallelisms, then Echo serves as Jinx's opposite. Echo stands for ideas and visions for Zorn which rival those of Silco's, and so Jinx's. There was a scene which was cut from season 1 which showed young Echo and Powder splitting ways because Powder wanted to go with Silco and Echo hated Silco for what he'd done to Benzo.
Benzo.
And Benzo may have seemed like a simple casualty that Silco didn't really care about. This painting from the Arcane art book shows us that Benzo and Silco were close back in the day, which just makes the scene so much more tragic. But going back to Echo, the makers use him more prominently to highlight the types of opposites that exist. Attraction, complementary, and enemies. So they give Echo a romantic and complementary subplot with Jinx and AU Powder, and use Jinx's parallel to Victor to set up Echo's enemy line post Silco, a false setup which is established all the way back in season 1. It's a genius use of established characters and archetypes. But speaking of opposites, most of them are highlighted in the older generation to make the main plot more interesting, questioning the cyclical nature of rivalries as well. So we have the rivalry of Vander and Silco, making Jinx and Vi more interesting. But just as we pointed out that Jinx already has an opposite in Echo, Sevika is used to contrast Vi, particularly when it comes to loyalty. Then we have the sidelined rivalry of Singed and Heimdigger, which comes to head in their proteges, Victor and Jace. But at the same time, Victor and Jace aren't enemies, but 2 sides of the same coin, with Mel and Echo enacting the foils for that rivalry. Then both Kate and Mel rival their mothers, making the cross alliances all the more interesting in the development of their relationship. By focusing on the stories of these 6 characters plus Echo, hopefully we can extract all the lessons that we need from Arcane to explore.
People deserve to choose their own fates.
Choice
is false.
You really are a
Big fat hero.
You're my daughter. I'll never forsake you.
Still don't get it, huh, sis? I'm always with you, even when we're worlds apart.
This isn't exactly the analysis I was expecting to make about the show, but I really think that the takeaways I got from it can only shine when we really understand these characters and the journeys that they've gone on. This channel was made to highlight the stories and share what I've learned from them. It's not about deadlines, format consistency, or growing the channel. These stories and characters come first, and I want to do these stories justice. But I also know that 10 weeks of consistent Arcane content is going to be tiring. So we'll be going back to the previous format where we'll have a week of Arcane content, then a week of something new, like finishing off the last Del Toro quest video. Next week, we'll be having our first Arcane character story analysis.
It's Victor.
Because I've basically got him all done with my OG run of the free will versus predestination video, and I'm super biased towards my favorite character. So I hope to see you then. Hopefully this video wasn't a bore, and that you still learned something today. It's important to me that I feel the content that I make is worth sharing, and not just a whole ramble of gobbledygook. And especially for a story like Arcane, it is one that definitely deserves care and attention to the details. That wasn't something that I felt I could do with my previous plan, so we're changing it up. I'm also really excited to get into some of the other stories that I've been exploring in the meantime. So I hope you'll stick around. Be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.